everyone. I hope everyone's doing well and they're situated with the last week of the semester. So, as many of you noticed, this is the last week that we are just overall reading particular things about God's existence. So, there's a lot of things going on this week because we ending this semester June 5th. So please pay attention to how things are going on, what are going on in these couple days for this module. So, if you remember, last week we talked about God's existence, right? We started to talk about God's existence, and we discussed the arguments of Anselm, William Paley, and Aquinas, right? They defended God's existence. And then we also discussed the atheist Richard Dawkins and how he refutes or tries to refute William Paley. So that was discussed on Module 3. But now we are going to provide different argument for God's existence. And today we're going to be talking about the African argument of God's existence, which is quite similar to the design argument of William Paley, or the fifth argument or fifth demonstration of Aquinas. But they kind of tweak it in their own way. Now, in the reading, it's not really talking about every African tribe, but it's just some particular tribe that would believe in a type of monotheism. Monotheism being only believing in one God. Then the next video, after this one, we're going to be talking about another atheist or another skeptic by the name of Hume. And he has particular refutations against Aquinas and William Paley. But for today, we're going to be only talking about the African monotheism and a particular design argument. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in to the discussion of this particular reading. And I think the reading was fairly short, so it's going to be a short presentation. So the first thing that the reading talks about is ex nihilo and ex materia. So the question I have here for you is, what is the difference between creation ex materia, which is out of nothing, or out of material things, sorry, versus creation ex nihilo, which is out of nothing? So in the Western lens, or in the Christian lens, they have this concept called ex nihilo, which means out of nothing, which is ex nihilo, nihil fit, which is out of nothing comes nothing. And what the Christian Western thought presents is that God takes nothing and makes the whole universe, right? If you read Genesis 1, right, chapter 1, and in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? God used only his power to create the entire universe. He used nothing to create the entire universe. And he designed the universe in a certain way, and he designed all of us in a certain way. And he did all this through his power, through just his attribute omnipotence, right? He didn't use anything. There was no material things that he used to create the universe. God only used his particular power to create the entire universe. He didn't have to use anything. However, on the other hand, the African lens, the non-Western lens, they say like, no, it's not that there was nothing. There was God, of course, but there was this pre-existing matter that God used to create the entire universe. So picture it this way. In the Western lens, right, if you know about the Big Bang Theory, the Big Bang Theory is a scientific theory that suggests that time, space, and matter all started to exist. So if we were to take that Big Bang Theory and Christianize it, we would say, well, God used his power to create and start the Big Bang, right? Whereas for the African lens, they would say like, no, God used pre-existing things before the Big Bang to create the things in the universe. Okay, so before the existence of everything, or the existence of every thing that exists in the universe, there was God, and then there was these pre-existing material things that God used to create the entire universe. So you can see the difference here. The Western lens is saying, no, God only uses power. He didn't have to use anything. There was no pre-existing matter that existed outside of time, space, and matter, right? God didn't need any material things. All material things come from God, right? It comes from his power, his attribute omnipotence, where he wanted to create the entire universe. That's the Western lens. Whereas the African lens is saying, no, there was both God and this pre-existing matter that God used to create the entire universe. Okay, so now you can see the difference between the two. The Western lens is ex nihilo, and the African lens is ex materia. Okay, now let's go on to um, the next slide. So the question I have here, how does ex materia, understanding of God, promote a divine being who is a great architect, according to the African lens, right? And how does the concept of ex materia work well with the fine-tuning argument as stated in section 3.43 on page 20? Now, another way to say the design argument or the teleological argument is the fine-tuning argument, where God has designed the universe in a certain way. He has placed things in a certain way, and it has this particular purpose and design. So remember, right? Like I said in the slide before this, God creating things out of nothing, which is the Western lens, versus God creating things out of pre-existing matter. We can see how there's a difference between the two. So in the Western lens, especially with William Paley from Module 3, he said God designed us and the universe in a certain way through his power. So, but in the African lens, we can say that God is a great architect, because think about an architect for a second, or an engineer, house engineer for a second. The architect is using material things to create something so beautiful, right? Let's say if you've been to New York City, right? If you see the Statue of Liberty, it's a beautiful statue. So the one who created it, he used matter to create the Statue of Liberty, right? So in the same way, there's a great architect in the world. Us humans create beautiful things out of material things, right? We take material things and we mold it and we create a certain product. The African lens is saying God is such great architect, much greater than us, that he takes these pre-existing matter to create the entire universe. So it manifests, instead of manifesting more of God's power like the Western lens, they are manifesting more of God's omniscience and creativity. He's using his creative power to create the universe, using his creativity, taking these pre-existing matter to create the whole entire universe. So in some ways, it works well with the fine-tuning argument or the great design argument, because God is still designing the world in the way he wants to design it. But here's the catch, or here's a particular lens of the African lens, which is the last slide that we have here. How does the African concept of interconnection promote that the world is fine-tuned? What is the African monotheism fine-tuning argument? In other words, what is their great design or teleological argument? So, as we can see, God here is a great architect for the African monotheistic understanding of God, right? If you remember on Module 1, or it was in Module 2, no, Module 2, we discussed African Ubuntu ethics. And if you remember, African Ubuntu ethics talks about how the community is very important, how African tribes, a lot of them are communitarian. They focus a lot about community and how we can bring harmony with the community. This same application or this same thought applies to their view of God, where God designed the world in a certain way through this pre-existing matter. God designed the world, fine-tuned the world or the universe in a certain way. But the way he designed it is that everything is interconnected together. We all need each other, according to these African tribes. I need animals, the animals need us. Both animals and myself and you guys all need the planet. The planet needs the galaxy that's within it, the galaxy that the planet is within, right? Something like that. The galaxy needs other particular things in order to exist. Everything that exists in the universe all needs each other. That's the African lens. In this way, all these things work in harmony. They are designed in a certain way to work in harmony. And the one who made the world in this harmonious and interconnected way, guess who it is? Well, God. So the African concept of the fine tuning argument, or their particular fine tuning argument, is that God has harmonized and interconnected the world in a certain way where we all need each other, that we all are in need of every particular thing that exists in the universe. I need animals, animals need us, animals and humans both need the planet, right? We need nature. Nature needs also us because we need to take care of nature. So all these things are in harmony. Everything is interconnected. And the reason why it's interconnected is not by chance that or everything is in harmony or everything is interconnected. No, it's because God is the one who created the universe in that certain way. And the way God created the universe in that certain way is through pre-existing matter. Okay? So clearly you can see the difference between the Western thought of God and the African thought of God. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. If it doesn't, feel free to send me an email and I'll be happy to respond. All right, thank you, and I'll see you for the next slide or the next recording.